The sky above the lake was a dark purple. That's not so strange, because it was twilight. And you can imagine that on this lake there's this island. It's called the Hidden Cove. And on that island there is a cabin, and on that cabin, it looks obviously abandoned. It has broken windows and a door that's just loose on its hinges. And the only way to access this cabin is by means of an old bridge. It's made out of creaking wood and rattling metal chains. Now my dad was looking out to that island with inspiration in his eyes when he turned to us. My brothers and I who were huddled around the campfire, and my dad said, "Have you boys heard of the story of Black Jack Chirac?" When I heard that name, I swear that the leaves behind my father rustled in the wind, and I found the hair standing on the back of my neck. My oldest brother, who's the bravest of us three, he speaks first. "No? Who's that?" Suddenly, my dad reconsiders. "You know what? I think you boys might be too young for this particular story." As the youngest, most sensitive gay boy of the family, I am relieved. Maybe now we can just go back to roasting marshmallows like we've been doing before. But then my middle brother beside me, he betrays me. He says to my dad, "We're not too young. Go on, tell us." What can I do? I'm the youngest brother. I know that democracy has already spoken, so there's nothing I can do. In fact, all I can do is watch my marshmallow slowly burn to a crisp as my dad begins the story of Black Jack Chirac. My dad tells us the story of a mining prospector, a man who was devilishly greedy, so greedy in fact that he would kill anyone who dared to step onto his island. In fact, at the time, there was even reports of missing children who were not so far off from the age of my brothers and I, as luck would have it. Then one day, Black Jack Chirac disappeared. And the locals, they rejoiced. They rejoiced because the menace was gone. They didn't even question the fact that they never found his body. They made up a rumor. They said that the great Canadian bears had walked into his cabin and torn him apart limb from limb, not leaving a single trace behind. Then my dad leans forward, and I remember how the flame of that campfire turned his skin to a color of orange, yellow, and red. And he said, "Rumor has it, though, that people still go missing this very day. In fact, any child who dared to step onto that island after dark should consider themselves lucky that they would ever return again." That night, every time I closed my eyes, I could see Black Jack Chirac with dirty fingernails holding a rusty blade and driving it slowly across my throat. And I would wake in a shock, and I would see my brothers also awake, because none of us could sleep knowing of the pure evil that just lay over on that island. In the morning when we woke up, we were pale in the face. We were rubbing the sleep out of our eyes. We could barely have a bite of breakfast. And when my dad saw this, he felt proud. Because as far as horror stories go, Black Jack Chirac was an immediate success. Mission accomplished, he got his kids. Flash forward a couple of years, and we just moved into this new house. Now it is a red brick manor. It sits on top of the hill. It has this wraparound garden. By daylight, it is beautiful. But by night, it becomes something different. You see, it's an old house with walls that tend to creak, and with critters that live behind these walls, scratching and scurrying around. And sometimes when you're walking around the house, you can feel a cold breeze wrap around your neck from where the wind sweeps in past the window. We didn't have much when we first moved into that house. In fact, we didn't even have electricity, so we had to eat our dinners by candlelight. Again, my dad turns to us with inspiration in his eyes. "You know, boys," he says, "I think I remember a story about this very house." Again, my oldest brother is first to speak. He says, "Come on, Dad, come on. We know." My middle brother jumps in as well. "We know you made Black Jack Chirac up." I mean, it was the first time I heard about it, but okay. My dad isn't fazed by this criticism. He just crosses his arms and says, "Well, you know, this story, I read about it in the newspaper." Well, if it's in the newspaper, then it must be true. So, my dad again begins to tell us a story. He tells us a story of this construction worker. This masterful construction worker who had worked on building our home. Now, this man knew how to work a hammer and nails, but he did not know how to work his friends. He was a grumpy man. He liked to fight. He liked to cause problems, but because he was gifted, they let him work on the site anyways, but they left him alone. Now, one day, this grumpy man, from the attic, he slips. He slips and he falls between two walls. And as he's falling, he tries to scream for help, but he breathes in dust and insulation. It hurts his lungs, so he can't say anything. And the walls are too tight, so he can't move his arms or his legs. He's stuck. The people don't even notice that the man has gone missing. No, they just think that the grumpy man had moved on to a better site to make more money. What was he doing working such an amateur job as this? So, they continued building the home. And they left him trapped inside. And he was trapped even as the mice began to sniff at his feet. And he was trapped even as the bugs began to burrow into his skin. And he remained trapped until he was nothing but dust and bone. Again, my dad has a secret for us. He says, "You know, if you listen closely, you can hear his spirit up into the attic this very day. It's the sound of sliding across floorboards." Why sliding, you might ask? Because this man was known as the man on skis. Wait a minute, my oldest brother says. That doesn't even make sense. My dad is taken aback. He's almost offended by the suggestion. "What are you talking about?" "Well, why skis?" Suddenly, that glint of inspiration in my father's eyes, it fades as he's realized he's made a creative mistake. A blunder. Why skis? Why skis indeed? Suddenly my dad has to scamper, he has to scatter, he has to bring ideas into his head, so he starts to say that this man, his hobby was skiing, and the old family that moved in, they had a pair of skis, so he's going to haunt them, and the reason why he stays up in the attic is because he can't ski downstairs. Even me, the most sensitive young gay boy of the family, can hear that this is a bit silly. And so we start to laugh. And even as my dad continues to scramble, we just continue to laugh at him. And maybe the true horror of this moment is my father realizing something. That his sons have outgrown him. It's true. Now, he did try to get us every now and then. He did try to get us with these stories. He did try to bring back the magic that was Black Jack Chirac, but every time the result was the same. We would start to laugh. It was as though the man on skis was haunting him instead of us. And slowly and surely, bit by bit, my father stopped telling stories. But here's the thing. It's not a complete failure, right? Because when I look back at these moments, I think, where would I be without Black Jack Chirac or the man on skis? And maybe I owe my father an apology and a thank you, because without him, maybe I wouldn't be on stage today. Happy Halloween, everybody.